Jai Radha Madhava Kunja Bihari Kunja Bihari Jai Radha Madhava Kunja Bihari Madhava Kunja Bihari Gopijana Bhalabha Girivardhari Gopijana Bhalabha Girivardhari Yasodhanandana Brajajanuranjana Yasodhanandana Brajajanuranjana Jamuna Tiravana Jadi Jamuna Tiravana Jadi Jaya Radha Madhava Kunja Bihari Madhava Kunja Bihari Jaya Radha Madhava Kunja Bihari Madhava Kunja Bihari Gopijana Bhalabha Girivardhari Gopijana Bhalabha Girivardhari Girivardhari Jasodhanandana Brajajanuranjana Jasodhanandana Brajajanuranjana Yamuna Tiravana Chadi Yamuna Tiravana Chadi Jaya Radha Madhava Kunja Bihari Jaya Radha Madhava Kunja Bihari Jaya Radha Madhava Kunja Bihari Jayom Vishnu Pad Paramahansa Parivajakacharya Astatara Satyasi Srimad His Divine Grace A.C. Bhaktivedanta Swami Srila Prabhupada Ki Gaura Premanandi Om Namo Bhagavate Vasudevaya Om Namo Bhagavate Vasudevaya Om Namo Bhagavate Vasudevaya. We get a bonus. This morning we get 2 verses because the first one has a very short purport. And I don't know if it's a good idea to chant both of them. I'll just recite 34 and the translation purport, and then we'll chant together 35. How's that? You ready? Okay. Yad artham yayushashtasya prarardham abhidhiyate purva parado pakrato yaparodya pravartate. The 100 years of Brahma's life are divided into two parts, the first half and the second half. The first half of the duration of Brahma's life is already over, and the second half is now current purport. The duration of 100 years in the life of Brahma has already been discussed in many places in this work, and it is described in Bhagavad Gita 8:17 also. 50 years of the life of Brahma are already over, and 50 years are yet to be completed. Then, for Brahma also, death is inevitable. Text 35. Purvasyado paradhasya Brahmo nama mahan abhut Kalpoyatra bhavad Brahma Shabda Brahmeti yam viduhu Purvasyado parardhasya Brahmo nama mahan abhut Kalpoyatra bhavad Brahma Shabda Brahmeti yam viduhu. Purvasyado parardhasya Purvasyado parardhasya Brahmo nama mahan abhut Bhavad Brahma Shabda Brahmeti Purvasyado parardhasya Brahmo nama mahan abhut Kalpoyatra bhavad Brahma Shabda Brahmeti yam. Premananda. Purvasyado parardhasya Kalpayatra bhavad Brahma Shabda Brahmeti yam viduhu. Purvasyado parardhasya Brahmo nama mahan abhut Purvasya of the first half. Adau in the beginning. Para ardhasya of the superior half. Brahmaha Brahmakalpa. Nama of the name. Mahan very great. Abhut was manifest. Kalpaha, millennium. Yatra, whereupon. Abhavat, appeared. Brahma, Lord Brahma. Shabda Brahma iti. The sounds of the Vedas. Yam, which. Vidduhu, they know. Translation: in the beginning of the first half of Brahma's life, there was a millennium. Interesting word. Prabhupada uses millennium in different ways, different times, but at least here it means kalpa. Day of Brahma, kalpa, millennium. There was a millennium, Brahmakalpa, called Brahmakalpa, wherein Lord Brahma appeared. The birth of the Vedas was simultaneous with Brahma's birth. Purport. According to Padma Purana, Prabhasa Kanda, in 30 days of Brahma, many kalpas take place, such as the Viraha Kalpa and Pitri Kalpa. 30 days makes 1 month of Brahma, beginning from the full moon to the disappearance of the moon, which is a half a month. 12 such months completes 1 year, and 50 years completes 1 prarardha, or 1/2 the duration of the life of Brahma. The Sveta Varaha, appearance of the Lord, is the first birthday of Brahma. The birth date of Brahma is in the month of March. According to Hindu astronomical calculation, this statement is reproduced from the explanation of Srila Vishwanath Chakravarti Thakur. Any questions? Calculation of time from the atom. So we're given a sense of time. And time plays a very important role in material existence. Things don't happen without time. By the force of time, things happen. Without time, nothing happens. Because things happen, it means there's the influence of time in the material world. So here's some discussion about time, now way up to the scale of the life of Brahma, which is a lot of time. And Brahma Kalpa, there was a millennium or a kalpa called Brahma Kalpa, wherein Lord Brahma appeared. So more specifically in the purport, it's Sweta Varaha. That's one of the days, Sweta Varaha. The Sweta Varaha appearance of the Lord is the first birthday of Brahma. How are, from the Vedic calendar, how does the starting date of things get fixed? Well, the purport here refers to Vishwanath Chakravarti Thakur, that according to Hindu astronomical calculation, there must be something within the Vedas, it doesn't say where that something is in the Vedas, for Vishwanath Chakravarti Thakur to make this declaration, the birth date. Of course, it's by lunar calculation, that's a certain phase of the moon. The certain phase of the moon is on the full moon day of the first day of creation. Question: how is there a full moon? I'm waiting for someone to ask the question, so I'm anticipating. Notice my strategy. How can there be a full moon before Brahma creates? Good question, isn't it? Well, it doesn't give the answer. Other than by the realization of great triple great acharyas, they count backwards. How long did this take and how long did that take? And they count backwards. So it's not exactly there's a full moon because there's no moon. But count backwards. That's the only thing that makes sense to me. Now, I don't know anything from our acharyas that says, yeah, the bell rings, that's the right answer. But it's a good question. It's a natural question. If someone's paying attention, how can there be a full moon before he creates? Very specific. And then the time, the passage of time for Brahma is one can calculate the phases of the moon. And then the next moon, so there's a month. And then the month of Brahma is so many years by earthly calculation, etc., etc., etc. So how does the bell ring to get the thing started? Month of March, and the full moon in the month of March. Now, I don't know if is that in our Vaishnava calendar? The birth of Brahma in March? I'm not aware of that. Why not? Because here it is, from Vishwanath Chakravarti Thakur at least. So what caught my attention as I was reading this is the appearance of the Vedas was simultaneous with the appearance of Brahma. Maybe some of you also noted. So it's similar to, different from, but similar to all this topic that we were discussing in the evening and in previous verses of Queen Kunti's prayers. He who is unborn is born. There's no birth, but there's birth. There's birth. Now Brahma has a material body, so there's birth. The Vedas have no material body, but there's birth, or the appearance. No, it doesn't give a description of how the birth of the Vedas took place, other than sound. The Vedas, present through sound, made their appearance when Brahma made his appearance. There are sections of the Bhagavatam where there's discussion between Shruti and Vidya, personalities with forms, otherwise how can they have a conversation? Shruti and Vidya. What they look like isn't described, but they had a conversation, this and that and the other thing. So they're personalities, not just sound. Now the perception of those personalities is another thing. But with the sound, with everything, behind everything, there's a person. And these persons, or Vedas and Vidya, are expansions of the source of everything. As the source of everything has form, that which emanates from the source of everything has form. And one may say no. The Vedas say yes. And we may or may not realize it. One of the presentations that I've been making at japa retreats and at colleges is mysteries of sound. And one of the slides in mysteries of sound has to do with raga. And with raga, this is from Bhanu Swami. I don't have access to verify what he expressed. But raga, in simple terms, is just combinations of notes of the musical scale. And certain combinations of notes of the musical scale make this raga or that raga according to the time of day. Familiar for us in ISKCON, although we're not be so aware, most of us are aware, when we have our Mangala Arati song, it's a morning raga. And if the same song is sung midday, when it's the disappearance of someone or something like that, it's a midday raga. It's the same song, just a different raga, different combination of notes that makes a different raga. And there, at least, the simple understanding is the raga enhances the mood. It helps the hearer feel the mood of that part of the day. Now, according to those who are very expert in raga, according to Bhanu Swami, those are expert. Along with the raga, there's a mantra for the raga. And the mantra is the personality of that raga. And so when the expert persons recite that raga, they first recite the mantra, and for them it manifests the personality of the raga. And the expert hearers can visualize the form of the personality of the raga. That's a detail. But the principle is everything, the origin of everything is a person, and everything that comes from the origin of everything has personality, including the Vedas and ragas and vidya. And we haven't met them, but we've heard the Vedas, so according to our capacity we can appreciate the sound that comes from the original source of everything, which is He's eternal, and these sounds are eternal, and the forms of these sounds are eternal, and we may or may not become refined enough to recognize all of that, but at least in principle we should understand. When Brahma came, he accepted a material body, and for Krishna's purposes, the Vedas, plural, manifested at the same time. Just like in chapter 87 of Canto 10, prayers by the personified Vedas. So these are the Shrutis. They also have form. And they're having, Shruti conversation. And this one says this, and that one says that, and they have some dancing and some kirtan and some Hari Bols, and they're exchanging transcendental knowledge about the transcendental personality of Godhead, and it's unpacked because the Vedas, the Shrutis, the Upanishads are difficult to understand for me, probably for most people, but if you have the patience to go through chapter 87 of Canto 10, it can be unpacked. It doesn't describe their forms, but we should understand Shrutis, Vidya, everything has form. Two-dimensional and three-dimensional form. Two-dimensional is something that we can see. We can see the impact or the effect. One can display the form of musical notes, for example. And there's ways of doing that. And one can, so refined and refined and refined, we're not refined. But there's a way to become refined, and the way to become refined is sound from the proper source. So that sound from the proper source is manifest along with Brahma. Let's go back to the purport. These are details that don't impact our devotional life so much. It's information, information, information. But for those who are very elevated, information doesn't remain on the platform of information. It's truths about the absolute truth that may help us appreciate how the Absolute Truth does what the Absolute Truth does. Meaning, behind everything there's a person. And persons may manifest different potencies, and those different potencies carry out different functions. But behind the potencies that carry out functions, there's a person, or persons that come from the Supreme Person. That's the system that the Bhagavatam is helping us to understand, because that's reality. And if we don't understand this and that and the other thing, I'll just share something from a discussion that's likely to take place during the Vyasa Puja. I requested, there's different persons who are going to take a facilitator's role in topics, there's many, but topics that are essential to the mission of our founder Acharya. And there's many, but one of them that maybe not so popular, but certainly is something that Prabhupada beat the drum and blared the horn, is challenging blind faith that people of this world have in modern science. I'll just share. When the fifth canto Bhagavatam was published, it rocked the Hare Krishna movement, because it confronted the faith that people have in science, like in the face. Not slap, but in principle. And some people left, and some people were disturbed, and some people were scratching their head. And I wasn't with Prabhupada, but he came to New York, then he went to Toronto and traveled across Canada for a while. And there were devotees that were traveling with him, specifically to ask this question, that question, the other question. I was told by one of them that Prabhupada said one of his purposes was to shake the foundation of blind faith that people have in science, because, in his words, it's the biggest obstacle to furthering the message of Srimad Bhagavatam, blind faith that people have in science. In other words, if it matches what modern science says, then okay. If it doesn't match what modern science says, then I have a doubt. Maybe not that it's not okay, but I have a doubt. Because of blind faith. And largely, as we all know, modern science has a presupposition. You don't talk about God. Now, some are more overt in God doesn't exist. But a little more pristine version is, we're going to have a science conference, but you can't talk about God because it's not part of our conversation. And it's like, that's, everyone goes to school, and that's the paradigm. God's out of the picture. Or there is no such thing, and there are people that make scientists that make a cause to say there's no God, etc. There's no soul, etc. Even there's evidence to have a way to explain that's not what it is, this is the way it is. Because everything can be explained. Like, what's his name? Hawkins? Stephen Hawkins? Is that his name? I'm an atheist because everything can be explained by science. That's it was his position. I never talked with him, but I read it. And, brilliant person. Have lots of people looking up to him, and that's the position. So Prabhupada wanted to confront that. So just a little sharing, that I asked two devotees who are involved in what the Bhaktivedanta Institute for Higher Education, for Higher Science, BIHS. You know about that group in Gainesville? So BIHS, I think that's their acronym. So they've had conferences and invited people to make in-face presentations on cosmology, meaning 5th Canto Bhagavatam, and different devotees. They've done many things. So 2 devotees, 2 disciples who will be with us for Vyasa Puja attended that conference. And one of them is in India right now, so I haven't had a conversation, but he's going to come. And I've asked them to be presenters and facilitators for discussion on this particular limb of Prabhupada's mission. So one of them, Nandi Mukhi, unique personality. What she's going to do, she shared with me, kind of like a little outline, is the role of the luminaries according to Vedic cosmology. And, Saturn, Moon, and the Sun. And then the dynasties of each. And one of the things she wants to do is make a presentation on the lineage that comes from them. And I said, people are going to get lost because the essence of Vedic cosmology is not the lineage from Chandra. I mean, it's important Krishna came in the Chandra dynasty, but what were the sequence that came from Chandra, etc., etc.? And her explanation was very simple. For me, recognizing the lineage makes it more personal. Coming from China, I'm a little surprised, but not surprised because she's very smart. It makes it more personal. In other words, not just a force or an energy moving things. This is the point that I wanted to make. Behind everything, there's person. And so she wants to emphasize and then engage the people in that this is not for this weekend. I asked her to be a speaker in the Memorial Day weekend where the theme is the glories of Srimad Bhagavatam. And one of the glories of Srimad Bhagavatam is explaining the structure of the universe and other things that are science-based in the Bhagavatam that are confronting the modern world picture that science has handed us in a silver platter. And we're supposed to nod our head and say yes. And if something doesn't match, there's some nervousness or something. Blind faith, Prabhupada calls it. And he liked to confront. So the point is, behind everything is a person. And behind the person, there's the Supreme Person. That means there's a person. There's Chandra, it's not just a moon. There's a moon god and the sun god. And it's not fiction. Question. For atheistic science, just like not so long ago, there was a solar eclipse. And modern science pinpointed when that solar eclipse would take place, with no reference to the Vedic picture, no reference to Vedic cosmology, no reference to a supreme person, just based on whatever the resources are that they use for understanding events that are going on in space. Very precise, very accurate. And much to their surprise, the Vedas also predicted, just like this saying, when Brahma appeared. Like who was around to say when Brahma appeared? It must be somewhere in the Vedas, because Vishwanath is not a fiction writer. So by his access to some statements in the Vedas, he makes a statement about when Brahma appeared, even though there was no moon yet. Beyond me. But the Vedas gave very precise depiction of when that solar eclipse would take place, just like Canto 10, chapter 83 and 84, it was known all over the land, there's going to be a solar eclipse. Let's have a festival. Go to Kurukshetra and have a festival, and that's what they did. How'd they know? Because they didn't have modern astronomy and they didn't have Hubble and whatever these new telescopes are. How did they know what they know? Through the Vedas. They didn't need their sense perception and expansion of the sense perception through different technology. They didn't have it. They didn't need it. But they knew. And sure enough, it happened when it was supposed to happen. So the paradigm is an altogether different paradigm. And one last thing. One paradigm leads one place, another paradigm leads another place. Take your pick. If both can explain, one takes you where, and the other one takes you where. Take your pick. Where do you want to be? This place or that place? So it's not just poo-poo on modern science. It's more important than how accurate is it, which is something one can make an argument about. Imperfect senses and tendency to cheat and make mistakes is subject to illusion. So anything they come up with has got to be changed over time and changed over time and changed over time, as opposed to that which doesn't change over time, provided one has a qualified teacher to understand that which doesn't change over time. Small matter. But aside from a science that changes, or a way of knowing things that changes due to imperfection of the instruments to gather that knowledge, one is infallible, the other is fallible. And you can rely on the infallible because the source is infallible. If you want to know, that's a better approach. Infallible source. Then comes, well, how do we know? Are the Vedas infallible? You know, some people ask that question. Why do you accept the Vedas? That's your authority. Anyway, so that's another discussion. With the acceptance that you have to have evidence for everything. If the infallible evidence comes from an infallible person, then the Vedas are infallible. I may or may not understand the Vedas, but the source is infallible. So best to have a good teacher. And when you have Vishwanath Chakravarti Thakur guiding you through the Vedas, you can just accept it, even if you can't understand it. But so back to the premise of what I wanted to emphasize on these two verses. Behind everything is a person. And from that original person, then different entities are manifest. Some are eternal, like the Vedas, and some are temporary, like the form, the body, and the activities of Brahma, and the business of bringing about creation, etc. And then the passage of time does what the passage of time does. It keeps moving things and moving things. And then finally, time withdraws the whole show. And there's some resting period. And then again, manifest. Another soul take the post of Brahma and 2 pararthas, and then he's finished. And that's how time moves. In this realm, it's cyclical. And there's time that's not cyclical, but eternal. That's the Vedic paradigm. So this whole chapter is giving the time that's cyclical, and how does it work? Cause and effect. You wiggle something over here, and something over there wiggles. And if you don't wiggle something over here, then something over there doesn't wiggle. There's cause and effect. So what's the cause behind everything? That's where it fits into the Bhagavatam. It's describing matter and the movements of matter and the persons that are moving within the movements of matter. But there's a cause. And then there's the temporal, past, present, future time that has its origin in the eternal. So how does it work? That's a nice question. And there's details. Discussion? A little technical, but that's the chapter, what to do. Yeah?
Small clarification.
What? Clarification.
So you said that things are coming from infallible. So what is coming from infallible is also infallible, like that you said, like because the Vedas are coming from infallible.
Yes.
So they are also infallible.
Yes.
And in terms of the material creation, it is they are also infallible in the sense like except it is temporary or going in cyclical, because there's a creation and destruction in the material creation.
Could you say it without the microphone? I probably can hear you better.
The material creation, it stays infallible because
Behind is the infallible. No?
we also see creation and destruction.
Yes.
So we are saying it is infallible because
Behind it is the infallible. That's why. What is when you're using the word infallible, what do you mean by infallible? There's no mistake, or do you mean that it's eternal? Because they're two different concepts. There's no mistake. Infallible doesn't mean eternal. Creation isn't eternal. It comes and it goes. And undergoes 6 transformations. That's part of the infallibility of creation. Does that address your question? Yes.
Guru Maharaj, I really appreciated your use of the word paradigm, because I can see how my current conditioned, fallible paradigm is like soldered to my eyes, so everything I see is colored by that paradigm. And accepting that, I'm trying to understand this concept that Lord Brahma is born in March.
Can you do without the microphone? I'm having trouble.
So the concept that Lord Brahma is born in March,
Yes.
is that the material time is created along with him like the Vedas are, or did he create material time?
He doesn't create material time, if that's your question. What's the process? Here's the process. Cosmic annihilation, living entities, the totality of living entities, including Lord Brahma, are within the body of Mahavishnu. And time as we know it passes. And then it becomes time, as we know it, for creation. And then there's a sequence, Canto 3, there's a sequence where Mahavishnu glances at Pradhan. Pradhan is explained there as being a shadow of Ramadevi. Ramadevi is his internal potency. The shadow of his internal potency is the external potency, but in a particular state, in an undifferentiated Pradhan state. And he, Mahavishnu, sees this Pradhan or Chaya Devi as having no service and wanting some service. So he wants to give her some service, that's all, just Icha. Ramadevi recognizes his desire, and as he's glancing at Pradhan, she carries his glance, or entrusts, not carries, she entrusts to his glance 2 things: time and the living entities. And when time and the living entities contact Pradhan, then the undifferentiated start to differentiate. So of those living entities, the samasti, totality of living entities, one of them is Brahma. and then other things and other things. So he's one of, for each universe, there's a corresponding Brahma. And there's so many universes, and as those universes are manifest from the body of Mahavishnu, the differentiated elements cling to those elements cling to the seeds of the universe, and then there's sequences and sequences and sequences without going through it all. Then and Garbhodakshay Vishnu enters into each universe, and then the demigods are needed in order for the whole show to begin. And one of those living entities within the body of Garbhodakshay Vishnu is the Brahma of that universe, and he manifests the Brahma of that universe. So now back to your question. He's one of the living entities. That's part of the totality of all living entities. Each universe gets a universe's worth. When Garbhodakshay Vishnu, the explanation that I've understood is, when Garbhodakshay Vishnu enters into each universe, he takes with him a universe's worth of living entities. It's not the totality, because there's many universes, but all the living entities that are for each universe, he carries with him. And one of them manifests as Brahma. So back to the moon, the full moon of the month of March. Does that answer your question? It still doesn't answer you have an answer to the full moon in the month of March before there was a moon? Okay.
I was also I was also wondering that if Brahma's time is so expansive in comparison to our time, then how is it that they can actually identify that his birth is in the human month of March? I think by month of March they're referring to.
Well, my understanding is this: what is going on in the heavenly realm or in Brahma's realm can be correlated with Earth time. So the movements of the moon is not per se the movements of time for the heavenly realm, what to speak of Brahmaloka. But it's the calculation of time as we know it from the earthly realm. That's one explanation. There's probably others. But because the Bhagavatam is for earthly people, it's speaking of other beings besides earthly people, but it's for earthly people.
Yes, and I guess it has to be very accurate, because just as 12 hours is some 4,300,000,000 years, so to map that expanse of time to our day and month is quite a feat.
Yeah, pretty challenging. I can't handle it.
I also wanted to ask you were mentioning about...
But mathematical people like it. I don't have aversion to math, but it's like that higher math is really too much for me. So I just okay. Okay, go ahead.
I also I wanted to ask you were mentioning about the paradigms, how one paradigm leads to a certain result, another paradigm leads to another result. And some scholars have also said that Vedic philosophy is path philosophy. It's philosophy not just for the sake of philosophy, but a philosophy that's leading to a certain end. Like it's a path that for self-improvement.
Say it again without the microphone, because I've got just the last part. Some scholars say blah blah blah. Path, P-A-T-H, the path phenomena, philosophy. Okay. No problem. Yeah. Yes. 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 Yeah. Did you catch it? I would like to say something challenging to the premise that it works. In some areas it works, but even in those some areas where it works, it has to be continually modified and continually modified and continually modified. And then there's some other areas that it just doesn't work. And there was a certain period of time I was really into Sariputta as a person and his brilliance of his writing. And for example, I spent some substantial time with mechanistic and non-mechanistic science. And one of the chapters in that book is models of inspiration. Short, inspiration doesn't mathematically compute. To say, where did this inspiration come from? Well, it's just chance. And then he does his mathematical thing because he was a mathematician. And, 10 to the so many power, it's just not feasible. And in contrast, someone was pondering on some mathematical premise, and they pondered, and suddenly within a few moments, the answer came. With the most advanced computer technology, the number of computation was not possible. It doesn't explain inspiration, mathematically. It doesn't answer, it doesn't work. And other things. Creating life, chemical evolution. I see several hands. Go ahead. You're closer to the microphone. And although I get baffled with the microphone. Go ahead, speak. Go ahead.
Chapter in the Bhagavatam.
This one?
Yes.
Yes.
We were asked a question, why is the time cyclical?
Why?
Why is the time cyclical in the material world?
Why? Why not?
What's the reason?
Because creation, maintenance, and dissolution is a function of time. So it's very practical to have time cyclical. Things are born, things stay for some time, they dwindle and vanish, and so it's cyclical. It makes events happen. It moves matter. Time moves matter in a cyclical fashion. Not linear, in a cyclical fashion. And then they happen again, and happen again, and happen again. So why is Krishna's arrangement for time to move in cycles? It makes the world go round. Time. Then satisfy you or no?
I was asked, so I answered that to facilitate karma.
To facilitate karma. You're saying that to facilitate karma.
It does what with karma? It facilitates karma?
Yes.
Yeah, same thing. Desire. What's karma? Desire in action. Material desire in action. Desire to be an enjoyer in action. Then there's karma. It facilitates karma. Sure. It's the correct answer. Aruta, you have a strong voice or no? You have a strong voice? Do you try? Eternal time.
space from one atom to another, the space.
Okay.
That. So if the atom becomes indivisible, is that eternal time? Like when you cannot...
The atoms are divisible. The atoms come into being and go out of being, so therefore divisible. It's kind of like his question of infallibility. They manifest and they're withdrawn, isn't it? Yeah. So they're not infallible or they're not eternal.
So how does time work in this?
How does time work? Eternal time specifically.
Yeah.
It's a mystery. It's a mystery. I mean, it's a nice mystery to ponder because, for example, Nitya Lila, pastimes that are eternal. Now, we don't know pastimes that are eternal. We know pastimes that have a beginning, a middle, and an end, and that's a pastime, like Krishna's birth. And then his departure and his pastimes in between. But those pastimes are eternal. So what does that mean? Just because I've been discussing it, that the pastime of going to Kurukshetra on the occasion of the solar eclipse. Now the solar eclipse, that's a worldly event, and they went. So what's Nitya Lila about that? Sounds like a past, present, future Lila. Or Krishna's killing Kamsa, etc. So what's Nitya Lila? Or aside from pastimes in this realm, pastimes in the spiritual realm. What's that? That seems to be what your question is. What's eternal time? And activities that are conducted by eternal time. They're not like these. These are like that. But what's that? It's eternal pastimes or eternal time. It's not explicable. At least my capacity is not to explain it. Rather, it's just, it has no beginning and have no end. Krishna is the son of Mother Yashoda, eternally. Is there a birth pastime? No. So how is he the son of Mother Yashoda? Eternally, he's Mother Yashoda's son. So how do you explain that? Eternal pastime. Or any pastime. It's of the nature of eternality, Satchit Ananda. And that's a big mystery. So how do we understand it? By accepting it, and may it be one day revealed to you and to me and the rest of us. I can't do better than that. Eternal time. Sri Radhika.
Huge environmentally, like for example.
You speaking about yourself or your kids or the world or?
The world.
The world.
You know, the examples that were being provided with the challenge of the modern science works come with huge ramifications.
To challenge that it works. Yeah, sure. Well, life comes from matter. Go ahead, create life. Here's the matter. And etc., etc. And that was a major part of Prabhupada's mission, explicitly because of blind faith that people have. And if they accept because it works, does it really work? You want to add?
So, that's a separate topic, but what they predict, well, if you put this together, it will blow up and kill millions of people. That seems to work. Now, in the Srimad Bhagavatam, we have sages who produce mystical weapons, who fly in space. If, for example, we had today someone who could chant those mantras and produce those mystical weapons, then millions of people would
start following Vedic science.
Oh, yeah.
But until we can't demonstrate something, we're arguing for Bhagavad science.
Oh, then that's it. The answer to that is, who's the qualified Brahmin?
We can't show that it's
Well,
actually.
you can't show, just like igniting fire through mantra. In this age, there aren't qualified persons to ignite fire for mantra. And therefore, Vedic yajnas that involve sacrifice of animals, where the animal's life is not taken, but they rejuvenate. So, it's myth. You can't demonstrate it because there aren't qualified brahmanas. So what can you demonstrate? You can demonstrate the miracle of transforming degraded people into elevated people. And that's a miracle. So it works. At least in terms of character, and to the degree that one becomes especially proficient, like something like, not at the same level of our great acharyas, but something like our great acharyas, then, let's take, for example, I'm thinking of the life of Bhaktivinoda Thakur. And he did miracles. Not everyone can do miracles, but he did. And how to explain? What modern science can't explain. So you have to have qualified people to do things that the Vedas are capable of accomplishing. You want to add something? We should end with this.
I was trying to add to this discussion here that, if we were to take a science like Ayurveda, where there is demonstrable ability for that body of knowledge to provide a health outcome that is, evident.
Yes.
Much more evident, much more tangible.
Yes.
So that's one example where we can very tangibly show. Second is also the omnipresence of yoga and the practice of yoga, whatever variation and flavor it is right now. Again, these are some of the practices that are emanating from the same
Yes, body of literature.
body of knowledge. And again, the efficacy of all of these different methodologies also demand a particular lifestyle, which the existing body of knowledge with science and the lifestyle that it has promoted is incompatible with.
Yes.
And so if we try to implement a framework that is embodied by the Vedic system and try to implement it within a lifestyle of science, it's very difficult to show that this works here. You have to
Yes.
it have to be in a framework for it to show that it actually works. So I'm thinking perhaps there's also incompatibilities of frameworks here that is challenging.
Grantaraj Srimad Bhagavatam ki Gaur Premanandi.